Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. All the characters in the story who enter into intimate relationships are over 18 years old. I was distraught as I leaned against the railing on the terrace of our summer waterfront home in Essex, Connecticut, that early August morning in 2020. I watched my family, Trish, my wife of 34 years, my son Michael and his beautiful wife Lori with their newborn daughter Kylie, another son Stephen and his wife Meg, and my youngest daughter Gretchen, her husband Phil with their unborn child. Gretchen was 6 months pregnant, and her belly was just beginning to show under a loose t-shirt. My family is sprawled out on the sand on blankets, out of reach of the slowly rolling waves. Despite the fact that the worst period of the COVID-19 virus has passed, our family still observed social distancing. The beach blankets were spread out in a circle, each a few feet from the other. Our children arrived at our house this morning. They all lived in central Connecticut, where they grew up. The biggest problem Trish and I still faced was that we weren't allowed to hold our first grandchild in our arms. Kylie was almost a month old. According to current guidelines, newborn babies should be isolated from everyone except their parents until they receive 6 weeks of vaccinations. Although we were saddened that we could not hug and kiss our precious Kylie, we understood that our children are responsible for the well-being of their daughters, and we should not interfere in this. As the devastating effects of the COVID pandemic have affected our family personally and professionally, we have been very careful and followed reasonable rules and guidelines. But in general, I still had conflicting feelings. While the world was gripped by a terrible virus, Trish and I took the time and turned our stale marriage and mundane worldly life into something special. 6 months earlier. "Can you make me a drink?" Trish shouted, coming out of the garage and into the kitchen. It was the middle of March, Friday afternoon. I left my home office with a half-finished glass of bourbon in my hands and headed to the bar in our living room. After pouring a couple of inches of tequila and filling a glass with ice, frozen berries and lime, I added another inch of Knob Creek bourbon to my glass. "Here you go," I said, handing Trish her drink. "You're not going to believe what the asshole school bosses decided today," Trish said. "They are closing schools for the next 2 weeks. It's not only in our city. All schools in the state are closed until the end of the month. Damn it. I will be making up for missed school days until July." "No, you won't," I reassured my wife. "I read that this 2-week shutdown will not affect the length of the school year. You'll be free in the middle of June." Trish took a sip of her drink, sighed, and asked, "Where are we going to have dinner?" Since our children moved away, starting an independent life, Trish and I, a couple with an income well above the average, allow ourselves to dine in restaurants 3 or 4 evenings a week. Aren't you listening to the news? All restaurants are closed. Then what the hell are we going to do? Trish asked. Today I had a little time before lunch, and I went to the grocery store. The freezer in the basement is full of meat. At the same time, I bought the necessary necessities. I'll grill asparagus, shrimp, and steaks. Dinner was delicious, but we ate mostly in silence. We shared a bottle of wine, and when our plates were empty, Trish volunteered, "I'll clean up if you take the dog out for a walk." Without saying a word, I took my glass of bourbon, went to the bar, and poured myself another drink. I called the dog, and together we went out through the backyard to the paths leading into the forest. As usual, I walked Gordon, our 12-year-old Australian shepherd, until I finished what was in the glass, and then he and I returned home. I poured myself another drink and refreshed Trish's tequila along the way. Then he settled into an armchair and fell asleep unnoticed. A few hours later, Trish woke me up, insisting that I was snoring uncontrollably. "I want you to sleep in the guest room tonight," she said. The next morning was slow, as Trish and I suffered from a slight hangover. I took Gordon for a morning walk. The only difference from the evening was that now my favorite drink was a steaming cup of black coffee. Around 10 a.m., we were sitting at the kitchen table, realizing that our opportunities to make Saturday active are very limited. The gym we visited was closed. However, like all other secondary enterprises, federal and state officials suggested that everyone stay at home. "Let's go to the beach house. We can take a walk and clean it up properly." Trish rejected my idea almost immediately, and we sat alone with our thoughts for the next few minutes. Eventually, I got up from the kitchen table. "Where are you going?" She was interested. "I'm going to go to the beach for an overnight stay," I told her. I was approaching the stairs leading to the second floor when Trish roared. "What the hell am I supposed to do then?" I ignored her rhetorical question. 5 minutes later, Trish came into the bedroom and silently watched me pack. A minute later, she opened her closet, took out a gym bag, and packed the necessary clothes and accessories for the night and the next day. My suggestion to remove our cottage was a gross exaggeration. We use the service that is provided to us at the beginning of March. Winter dust is removed from the cottage, the kitchen and bathrooms are cleaned, furniture is placed on the terrace and patio. By 1 o'clock, Trish and I were walking along the beach and watching Gordon chase the waves. For dinner, I cooked grilled chicken, and Trish chopped vegetables for a salad. Cable TV and internet were not connected in the cabin yet, so after dinner we took another long walk. After all, in the middle of March, it is still cold at night on the beach, and for a walk we had to wrap ourselves in winter coats, hats, and gloves. That night we slept like the dead. "What are you thinking about?" Trish asked. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and looking out the window at Long Island Sound. "You have school holidays starting next week, right?" Trish nodded in agreement. I told my sales department to comply with all local termination regulations. After talking to my clients, I learned that our products and related surgeries have been deemed optional in most hospitals. All scheduled operations have been postponed. I won't have much work to do for the next week. Looking at Trish, I asked her, "Let's stay here for this time." I saw that Trish's first reaction to my request was no. I was glad to see how she restrained herself and thought about it. My wife sat on a stool next to me and looked at the surf outside the window. "We'll need the internet." I picked up my cell phone from the countertop, found a local internet service provider, and called customer support. 5 minutes later, I reported to Trish. "They will arrive today and connect the internet and cable." She was still staring at the gray water, but I noticed a smile appear. "Let's run home," Trish suggested. "We'll pack up what we might need for the week and come back for dinner." Later that evening, while I was frying a pork loin, Trish opened the sliding glass door and announced, "I was going to make us drinks, but you packed my tequila, but you forgot your bourbon." "I haven't forgotten," I admitted. "I've had too much to drink in the last year." I decided to give beer, wine, and booze a break for a week. Trish was watching me in surprise. "Can I get you something?" "What is it?" she asked. I shrugged my shoulders and asked, "I'd like a seltzer." 2 days later, I was going to take Gordon for our usual 2-mile morning walk. Trish was sitting in the living room in front of the TV and waiting for the start of a yoga class on YouTube. "Can I ask you a favor?" I asked my wife. Trish looked around and raised an eyebrow. "My chiropractor is unavailable due to the epidemic, and I know that without him, my back will soon start to hurt again. Dr. Joe sent an email to all his patients recommending that they start practicing yoga at this time. And you want to? Will you go for a walk with Gordon and me? After returning, I would like to do yoga with you." Trish tried to stifle a laugh, but failed miserably. "Are you sure? I can hardly help but laugh at you." I nodded and added, "But I'll be staring at your ass. You dirty old pervert." On Wednesday morning, after reading an email from the principal of her school, Trish told me, "In 2 weeks, the school opens for distance learning. I'll be busy all week, starting Monday. We will teach children using different internet platforms." After thinking for another minute, she asked, "Do you think we should go home? What do you think?" I asked. Trish shrugged, smiled, and confessed, "I'd rather not do that." Later that day, I returned from Lowe's. I had 2 folding tables and 2 folding chairs. Our house has 2 floors. The ground floor has an open floor plan and is both a residential and entertainment area. The second floor consists of 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The master bedroom is located at the front of the house and has a large window overlooking the water. The windows of 2 small guest bedrooms overlook the coastline, one to the north, the other to the south. Trish helped me move the furniture, and in an hour we set up 2 offices in the spare bedrooms. Each of them was equipped with a temporary, but quite comfortable desk, sitting at which you could see the view of a mile or 2 of the beach. Trish went to our house and returned with her school supplies. While she was setting up her new office, I sat on the terrace and started another project. "What the hell is this?" Trish asked. She had a big smile on her face. This is a smokehouse. I'm going to learn how to smoke fish and meat. And you're going to do it without a glass of bourbon? My wife teased me with a laugh. She laughed even harder when I gave her the middle finger. And when are you going to impress me with your first smoked dish? I bought all the necessary ingredients for my culinary magic. We'll have dinner at 6:30 p.m. My dinner of pasta, bacon, and smoked shrimp was an impressive success. I watched with satisfaction as Trish wiped her almost clean plate with the last piece of bread. She carefully gathered the remaining oil, garlic, and some olives. The piece was halfway to her open mouth when she said, "I can't eat anything anymore. Even this piece." With this confession, she reached across the table and fed me. It was amazing, Chris. I love you. For the next couple of weeks, we continued our beach life. We woke up at 5 a.m., took Gordon for a walk, and did morning yoga. My initial, completely awkward attempts at various poses gradually improved. Or at least I wasn't making Trish laugh hysterically anymore. I was still paying a lot of attention to her heart-shaped waist. Every morning around 7:30 a.m. we went to our offices and started the working day. As a rule, Trish worked until 1 p.m. and spent most of the day alone. I found that in order to fully fulfill my professional duties, I need to work from 7:30 to 11 o'clock, then from noon to 1400 hours, and from 15:30 to 1700 hours. As part of our property, we had a large detached two-car garage with a storage room on the second floor. We tried to keep the building in good working order, but we almost never used it. We parked our cars in the yard next to the house. It was the middle of April, and we had been living on the shore for a month when I made my decision. I received several recommendations, made several calls, and made 3 appointments. At 10 a.m., I poked my head into the back bedroom, which Trish used as her office. "Can you do me a favor, honey?" Trish looked up at me and said, "Of course. You can hear other people talking for the next hour. I'm preparing a surprise, and I ask you to stay in your office for this time." Okay. I'm not going out." I had to make the same request to my wife 2 more times during the day, and each time Trish agreed. By evening, I had 3 offers from contractors to convert our empty garage into an art studio for Trish and a separate home gym. The storage room above the garage was supposed to be a bunk room for our future grandchildren. When the builders I hired showed up the following Monday, Trish was completely at a loss. "You have to explain to me what's going on. We've been spending all summer here for the last 12 years. Summer is the only time when you can focus on art. I'll build you an art studio in one half of the garage and a home gym in the other. The second floor will turn into a bunk room for the wild tribe of our grandchildren. After the renovation is completed, we will be able to move all your art supplies and some of our exercise equipment from home here." I was smiling. This time, Trish couldn't find the words. It wasn't until lunch that I found out how excited Trish was. I was making us a salad when my wife came into the kitchen. She came up to me, pressed her hot body against mine, and kissed me hard, trying to tickle my tonsils with her tongue. We kissed nonstop for over a minute. This has become a record in the last few years. I was even more stunned when she knelt down, unbuttoned my jeans, and pulled them down along with my underpants to my knees. When Trish got up from her knees and kissed me with a devilish grin, trying to stick her tongue down my throat. When Trish heard me coming home on Friday, around noon, she came down the stairs. "You've been gone for a couple of hours. Where have you been?" She leaned over and kissed me, asking her question. "I took your list of things I need from home and want to get them, and some other things." Trish could tell from my voice that I was hiding something. "Something else?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I showed her my favorite little black dress and a pair of black high-heeled shoes that made her legs even more spectacular. "We're going on a date tonight. Be ready by 6:30 p.m. Chris, everything is closed everywhere." "What date are you talking about?" I bent down, kissed her on the lips, and whispered in her ear. 18:30. When Trish came down the stairs, only a few minutes late, I was already dressed in a navy blue pinstriped suit, white shirt, and red tie. When I saw my wife, I involuntarily said, "Wow," and whistled. A wide smile spread across Trish's face. "You look pretty good yourself, stud." After kissing me, she stepped back and pulled on my jacket. "How many kilograms have you lost weight?" "What is it?" she asked. I shrugged my shoulders and answered before taking her by the hand and leading her to our car. "To be honest, I don't know. Stopping by our favorite Italian restaurant, I picked up all our favorite snacks, salads, entrees, and desserts that I had pre-ordered. Then I drove to White's Marina. My neighbor Joe had an 8-meter sailboat moored there. Having visited her earlier in the day, I set up a small dining table in the cockpit at the stern of the boat. I brought a couple of candles, cloth napkins, and silverware with me. Since it was still April, I brought Trish a warm blanket so she could wrap herself in it while we ate. The wine I opened and served for dinner was the first alcohol we had drunk since we moved to live on the coast. All day I wondered if Trish would appreciate my efforts. Her smile and flirtatious conversation left no doubt that she was happy. And after dinner, she took my hand, led me to one of the built-in seats on the side, and took off my pants herself. With a light push, she made me sit up, lifted my dress, and we made love. On Monday afternoon, Trish went to the store. I was sitting on the terrace when she returned. Soon, when I heard the sliding door open, I looked up and saw Trish standing completely naked inside the house right in the middle of the room. "I need you. I need you right now. Immediately," she demanded. I meekly followed her toned body as she led me upstairs. When I entered our bedroom, Trish was already in bed. She was lying on her back with her legs up and spread in the form of a wide letter V. "Don't say a word. I don't want foreplay. I just want you to take me now." It only took me a moment to drop my pants and underpants and join my wife. When a few minutes later we were lying in each other's arms and breathing heavily, I wanted to know, what the hell was that? Trish giggled like the schoolgirl I remembered and asked, "Do you promise not to get mad? That sounds ominous. Maybe you shouldn't tell me." She giggled loudly again and told me, "I was in the store and tried to get an 18-kilogram bag of dog food into the car. A young guy came up to me and offered his help. Like me, he was wearing a protective mask. When he finished, he looked into my eyes, then looked into my cleavage and said, 'You have beautiful eyes.' I couldn't believe it. That kid was trying to pick me up. He said, 'If you want, I'll be happy to walk you home and help you put all your purchases in it.' Thank God I was wearing a mask, because my face must have turned purple. I thanked him and turned him down. I think my husband will be able to bring the dog food inside himself." As I was leaving, I looked over my shoulder at the guy and saw that his eyes were glued to my ass. I got so hot when I thought about the young guy trying to seduce me that I rushed home. The next night at dinner, Trish said, "I feel kind of uncomfortable." "What happened?" I asked. "Since the pandemic broke out, there has been so much death, destruction, and suffering. It's all happening around us. You and I knew people who died of COVID. But us? It looks like you and I are doing much better now than we have in a long time." I smiled, took Trish's hand across the table, and pulled it to my lips. After kissing her, I agreed. In addition to our morning and evening walks with Gordon, as well as yoga, Trish and I added a 45-minute workout with a barbell and dumbbells at noon. After the repairs in our garage were completed, I brought ashore the weighing kits that my sons used while they lived with us. Trish and I had no intention of becoming bodybuilders. We just wanted to stay strong and healthy. One day, when we finished training, Trish asked, "Can we talk?" We were sitting on benches facing each other. I looked at my wife and replied, "Of course. I'm thinking about retiring after the end of this academic year." When I didn't say anything, Trish continued, "I know that I need another year to maximize my pension, but I have lost the satisfaction of teaching. I'm tired of it. I'm angry that I can't compete with young, idealistic teachers. What do you think?" I smiled and said, "Looks like I need to plan a retirement party for you." Imagine my surprise when Trish stubbornly said, "No, you can't just say, retire. I want to talk about it." "All right," I nodded. "Let's talk. What do you really think about it? What will I do without a job?" I was going to flippantly reply, "Whatever you want." But at the last moment I restrained myself. After a few seconds of thought, I told Trish, "I will have to resume my business trips when the pandemic is over, and I wish you could accompany me in them. Maybe not every trip, but once or twice a month would be ideal. While I'm busy with work during the day, you could explore new cities. We could have dinner together tonight. Besides, you're going to be a grandmother in 6 weeks. You will be able to look after the child at least one day a week." After thinking a little more, I continued, "In recent years, you have had to put aside your passion for art and instead work as a math teacher at school. Go back to your dream. Become the artist that we all know you want to be." Before Trish could say anything, I continued, "You are one of the most talented people I know. You can do anything. But can we afford it, Chris?" "Of course. We can easily afford it. Please convince me." I chuckled to myself. Since the beginning of our marriage, Trish has put all the family finances in my hands. Every time changes needed to be made that required Trish's approval, I just put the prepared documents in front of her, and she just always signed them, never asking a single question. I began to explain to her, "I still enjoy working, and I do not plan to retire. I'm thinking of working for at least another 6 years, until I'm 65. When I retire, taking into account my pension, retirement account income, and Social Security payments, I will receive about 75% of my current income. Adding to that your teacher's pension, your individual retirement account, will have about 70% of what the two of us earn today. Chris, what about that pile of money that I inherited from Mom and Dad?" I smiled at Trish and replied, "This pile of money has been lying in various investment accounts, generating interest for the past 22 years. Today, it's a much bigger pile of money. If we continue to lead a reasonable lifestyle, we will be able to pamper our grandchildren and arrange for ourselves at least one fabulous vacation a year. And when we are gone, this pile of money will go to our children, and they will be able to invest it in their pension." When I finished, Trish had tears running down her cheeks. 2 days later, we were on an evening walk with Gordon. We were on our way home when I asked Trish, "I'd like to talk to you about something." "I'm listening." "I'd like to sell our house in West Hartford and move here permanently." I noticed that Trish held back her first thought just as I managed to bite my tongue and didn't blurt out what was on my tongue when Trish asked about her retirement. "Tell me, what are you thinking, dear?" "I also thought about moving here, but I don't know. We'll be so far away from the kids, especially now that Lori and Gretchen are pregnant." I said, "It's a 20 and 45-minute drive from West Hartford to each of their homes. If we move here, we'll be closer to Gretchen. Our children will be within an hour's drive of us." We walked in silence for a few minutes, then Trish asked, "You have something else, don't you?" I confessed, "2 more things. One of them is easy to say. The other one is a little more complicated." When Trish nodded, I continued, "You and I are living together now, and we don't need a 480 square meter house for 2 people. Why do we need 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and, in addition, 2 toilets? Why do we need a housekeeper and constant lawn care? Why do we need a swimming pool, which we almost never use because we move here in the summer?" "I agree. Tell me about the rest." "I don't like what our lives have become over the past few years. We love each other, but we've started to forget about it. We started fighting a lot after the kids left us. We practically fight all the time. We started drinking too much and eating poorly. Each of us was passionate about our careers, and we were too lazy, terribly lazy to communicate. We've developed too many bad habits." I thought for a few moments, then continued, "The other day you were talking about all the death and suffering that is happening in the world and how lucky we are that we are doing well. It's not just luck. We both worked hard. We train together every day. We've gone from 4 or 5 glasses of wine a night to 4 or 5 a week. You've gone back to your paintings and become a real artist, and I catch fish and cook it like a 5-star chef." Trish realized that there was more to it. After a minute, she said, "Tell me about the rest." "The other day I needed to ask you something, and I went to your studio. As I was approaching her, I suddenly heard you singing. Trish, I haven't heard you sing like that in 10 years. You looked so happy." I sighed and finished, "We've been trying so hard for the last few months, and now we're both happy. I don't want to lose it." Trish was crying quietly when she asked me, "Can we not say anything to the children yet, until I think about our move?" June 29th fell on a Monday, and it was our granddaughter's scheduled due date. Our daughter-in-law was scheduled to have a surgical delivery at 9:30 a.m. Needless to say, Trish and I couldn't get to work that morning. At 10:47 a.m., we received a message from my son saying, "Congratulations, Grandma and Grandpa. Your granddaughter Kaylee Patricia was born at 9:48 a.m. Mom, daughter, and I are fine. We love you." At any other time, Trish and I would have been in the car and rushing to Lori's bed. But these were not ordinary times. Lori and Kaylee were in isolation. Our son Mike was allowed to stay for 3 hours and then kicked out of the hospital. While I was thinking about our situation, I heard Trish come to the door of my office. When I turned to her, she said, "I'm coming, baby." A few minutes later, as we lay hugging, Trish giggled and said, "It was great. The perfect amount of hugging, making love." We put our house in West Hartford up for sale in mid-June. He was sold without bidding, and the contract was signed just before July 4th. Instead of putting Trish at risk of exposure to the virus, I asked her to sign a power of attorney. This gave me the authority to sign documents on her behalf. On the day of signing the contract, Trish kissed me goodbye and asked me to come home as soon as possible. Later that evening, after we had washed the dishes after dinner, I took Trish's hand and walked out onto the terrace with her. We sat in our outdoor chairs and looked at the water. "I wanted to surprise you with good news," I told Trish, "and now I regret that I didn't tell you about this surprise. We should have talked about this earlier." I could see the wheels turning in Trish's beautiful head. "Let me guess." She thought a little and gave it away. "Did you use my power of attorney and sign some papers that I do not know about?" I was stunned and asked, "How the hell did you find out?" My wife laughed and bent down to kiss me on the lips. "Listen, Buster, I can read you like a book." Seeing that I continued to stare at her in silence, Trish continued, "It was just a feeling, but you were acting a little flippant. I saw how relieved you were when you received the document I signed. I had a feeling that you were going to use it for something more than closing the sale of the house." I think my face turned red when I realized how well my wife knows me. "I spent some of the money from the sale of the house." Still laughing, Trish encouraged me. "Come on, tell me." "First of all, I paid off the rest of the mortgage on this house. It was a small amount. Then I closed the loan I took out to repair the garage. You did the right thing, but I guess that's not all. Keep going. Do you remember Bill Malloy?" "Of course. He and his wife moved to Florida a few years ago." I nodded and continued. "He's currently selling real estate in the Tampa area." Trish turned completely around in her chair and looked into my eyes. "And what did you do?" "What is it?" she asked. "I bought a small apartment in Clearwater Beach. It is furnished with everything necessary and ready to move in. I thought that the blue waters and the 25-degree temperature of the Gulf Coast would be a good option for us in January, February, and March." When Trish's expression didn't change, I said, "And I bought you a present. In case you get a little mad at me." I reached under my chair and pulled out 2 gift-wrapped jewelry boxes. "Are you going to buy me off with diamonds?" Trish asked. "Well, they're not exactly diamonds," I admitted. Trish opened the first box and found herself completely confused. Without saying a word, she opened the second one and was even more surprised. My wife took out 2 tiny pieces of cloth, which were stuffed into their own boxes, and shook them out, straightening them out. I laughed, watching her lips move but not making a sound. "This is a bikini for Florida beaches." "A bikini?" Trish asked in amazement. "It looks like 3 cotton balls connected by a fishing line." She laughed and asked, "And where will I ever be able to wear this?" I lifted Trish to her feet, kissed her, and asked, "How about wearing this tonight? For me?" We hugged and went into the house. Our days. My middle son, Stephen, walked away from our family on the beach and joined me on the terrace. "Can I get you a beer, Dad?" he asked. When I nodded in agreement, he reached into the refrigerator and took out 2 cans of cold beer. He opened both of them and handed me one. Then he looked back at our family sitting on the blankets and said, "You and Mom look very good. Congratulations." "Thanks. We tried our best." It took him a few moments before he continued, "Hey, Dad." When I looked at him, Steve continued, "You look 10 years younger. If you want to know the truth, I feel 20 years younger. You've even changed your behavior, Dad." "Maybe," I said to Steve. "Last week I found out that 2 colleagues and an old college friend lost their parents to COVID. That's 7 more people in the last few weeks. I am upset about the consequences that the virus has caused. And at the same time, I've never been so happy. I thank God for myself, for your mother, for our whole family. We are happy people." Steve reached out and hugged me. It took 5 seconds for a chorus to be heard from the beach in our address, "Social distance. You are spreading COVID. And no hugs?" I winked at Steven. We both laughed and went to the beach to join our family. End.